The smell of fear had a taste in space. David Cole learned this during his first week aboard Starforge Academy, where 12 different species sweated, bled, and trembled in ways that made the recycled air thick with anxiety. He walked through the corridor leading to Training Bay 7, his boots clicking against metal floors that had witnessed more failures than successes. Around him, cadets pressed themselves against walls as he passed. Not out of respect, but because nobody knew what to make of the human instructor. The Saros cadets towered above everyone else, their scaled hides gleaming under artificial lights. They moved with the confidence of apex predators, heads held high on serpentine necks. Behind them scurried groups of chiteks, their insect-like bodies chittering in rapid communication that sounded like angry typewriters. The crystalline lumens floated in small clusters, their translucent forms pulsing with shared thoughts. David reached his classroom and found it nearly empty. Again. Primitive Warfare. Read the sign outside his door, and the title drew snickers from passing students. Why learn about ancient combat when plasma rifles could vaporize targets from orbit? Why study hand-to-hand fighting when shields could deflect any physical attack? Only 7 cadets sat in the 40-seat auditorium. Captain Reed, the lone human student, gave him a weak smile from the front row. 2 Saros males lounged in the back, clearly there only because the class fulfilled a required credit. A nervous Chitek female tapped her claws against her desk, while 3 lumens shared silent communications through their crystalline surfaces. David activated the holographic display without preamble. Images of Earth's predators filled the air above the students. Lions stalking across savannas, wolves hunting in coordinated packs, great white sharks cutting through ocean depths. Who can tell me what these creatures have in common? David asked. One of the Saros males, Bricks, raised a massive clawed hand. They are extinct primitive beasts, Instructor Cole. Earth's ecosystem collapsed centuries ago. Wrong. David switched the display. Now it showed recent footage from Earth's nature preserves. The same predators thriving in protected habitats. They survived because they adapted. Not through technology, but through behavior. The Chitek female, Vera, clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. But surely modern weapons make such creatures obsolete. My species conquered our homeworld's predators with sonic blasters. Did you? David pulled up historical records. According to galactic databases, Chitek colonies still lose hundreds of workers annually to indigenous predators on 17 different worlds. Uncomfortable silence filled the room. David continued. Every species here represents a different evolutionary path. Saros grew large and strong. Chiteks developed swarm intelligence. Lumens achieved psychic unity. But He paused, studying their faces. Humans learned to think like predators. Captain Reed leaned forward. What do you mean, sir? We didn't just hunt dangerous animals. We studied them, understood them. Eventually, we earned their respect. The hologram shifted to show ancient cave paintings of humans and wolves working together. Other species killed their predators or fled from them. Humans made them partners. Brick snorted through his nasal slits. Partnerships with mindless beasts? How primitive. David smiled, and something in that expression made the large Saros shift uncomfortably. Are they mindless? Or do they simply think differently than you? Before anyone could answer, the classroom lights flickered red. Emergency klaxons began wailing throughout the station. All personnel to stations, announced Commander Thrix's voice through the communication system. We have incoming cargo from Sector 7. Maximum security protocols in effect. The students looked confused, but David felt something cold settle in his stomach. Sector 7 was the outer rim, where the galaxy's worst conflicts raged. What kind of cargo required maximum security? Through the classroom's viewport, David watched a heavily armored transport ship dock with Starforge. Military escorts surrounded it, weapons drawn. Whatever was inside that ship had the entire command staff nervous. Class dismissed, David said quietly. Report to your quarters and await further instructions. The students filed out quickly, excited by the unusual activity. Only Captain Reed lingered. Sir, she said hesitantly, do you really believe humans are special? Most of the galaxy sees us as backwards. David looked out at the transport ship where teams of engineers were unloading a massive containment unit. Through the transparent aluminum walls, something moved. Something big. Reed, he said without turning around. Being backward sometimes means you remember things others have forgotten. The containment unit disappeared into the station's lower levels, but David could swear he heard something inside it. A low sound that wasn't quite a growl, wasn't quite a roar. It was the sound of intelligence wrapped in fury, of a mind that understood exactly where it was and what had been done to it. David had heard that sound before, years ago on Earth, in the Australian outback, when he was 12 years old and face to face with a wounded dingo. The animal was trapped, dangerous, and absolutely terrified. But in its eyes, David had seen something that changed his life forever. He had seen recognition. The dingo knew that David was different from other humans. Not prey, not predator, but something in between. Something that understood the rules of survival that civilized species had forgotten. Now aboard Starforge Academy, David felt that same recognition calling to him from the depths of the station. Whatever was in that containment unit, it was no ordinary prisoner. It was something that remembered how to hunt. As alarms continued echoing through the corridors and security teams rushed past his classroom, David gathered his teaching materials with steady hands. The other instructors would probably laugh at his concern. After all, what could go wrong? Starforge had contained dangerous criminals, hostile aliens, and experimental weapons for decades, but none of those things had made the same sound as the creature in the transport ship. The sound of something that wasn't broken yet. The sound of something still waiting for the right moment to remind the galaxy what fear truly meant. Dr. Nala's forearms moved in perfect coordination as she reviewed the data streaming from Containment Level 5. Her compound eyes processed multiple information feeds simultaneously, a skill that made her one of the galaxy's premier xenobiologists. The creature they called a Ravager defied every classification system she knew. Fascinating, she whispered to herself, mandibles clicking softly. The being in the reinforced cell measured 4 meters in length, its body covered in what appeared to be natural armor plating. But the metal-like scales shifted color to match shadows, and thermal sensors couldn't get a consistent reading on its body temperature. Commander Thrix loomed behind her, his massive Soros frame casting shadows across the monitoring station. Can you determine its intelligence level, Doctor? Nala's antennae twitched with excitement. Sir, this creature is remarkable. Watch. She activated a feeding mechanism that dropped synthetic meat into the cell through an automated system. The Ravager didn't move toward the food. Instead, it remained perfectly still in the corner, watching the mechanical arm with eyes that seemed to glow with their own light. After the mechanism retracted, the creature approached the meat cautiously, sniffed it once, and then dragged it to a different location before eating. It recognized the delivery system as artificial, Nala explained. Most predators would have attacked the food immediately. This one analyzed the situation first. Intelligence is irrelevant, growled Thrix. The creature killed 47 soldiers before capture. It stays contained until we determine how to dispose of it safely. But Nala wasn't listening. She was watching the Ravager's behavior patterns, noting how it had already mapped every corner of its cell, testing walls and barriers with gentle touches that looked casual but were clearly systematic. 3 levels above them, groups of cadets gathered around viewing screens during their off-duty hours. The Academy's newest attraction had become a source of both fascination and crude entertainment. I bet it couldn't take down a full-grown Soros warrior, boasted Dex, flexing his impressive arm muscles. Several other reptilian cadets nodded agreement. Captain Reed stood at the edge of the group, uncomfortable with their casual attitude. Maybe we shouldn't be treating this like entertainment. It killed dozens of people. Primitive humans, scoffed Brix. No offense, Reed, but your species lacks proper combat instincts. We Soros have been apex predators for millions of years. As if summoned by their conversation, David Cole appeared in the observation lounge. The cadets fell silent, still unsure how to interact with the human instructor who seemed so different from his student. David studied the viewing screen for several minutes without speaking. The Ravager lay motionless in its cell, but something about its posture bothered him. Sir, Reed ventured. What do you think about the creature? It's not resting, David said quietly. It's waiting. Before anyone could ask what he meant, the station's lights flickered. Emergency power kicked in as the main generators cycled through a routine maintenance sequence that happened every 72 hours. For exactly 3 seconds, Containment Level 5 lost primary power. The Ravager moved, Security cameras showed only a blur of motion before the feeds went dark. When backup systems came online, the creature was gone, and the supposedly impregnable cell stood empty except for twisted metal that had once been barriers capable of containing a starship. Alarms shrieked throughout Starforge Academy. Blast doors slammed shut, dividing the station into isolated sections. In the command center, officers shouted orders while trying to track something that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. "How did it escape?" demanded Thrix. Dr. Nala stared at the destroyed containment cell through emergency lighting. "It was never trying to break out," she whispered. "It was learning the power cycles, memorizing our security systems." The first attack came in Section C, where 3 security guards were patrolling routine corridors. They found the first guard's weapon lying in a pool of blood, its energy cell drained. The second guard's body was discovered hanging from the ceiling. Positioned where his partner would see it first, they never found the third guard at all. By the time response teams reached Section C, the Ravager had vanished again. Motion sensors throughout the station showed movement in impossible locations. Air vents too small for the creature's size, maintenance tunnels that led nowhere, sealed compartments that couldn't be accessed from the outside. "It's using the station's infrastructure against us," reported Security Chief Kale, his voice tight with frustration. "Every time we track it, it's already gone." David stood in the command center studying the schematic displays that showed the creature's path through Starforge. While everyone else saw random attacks, he recognized a pattern. "Commander," he said calmly, "you need to evacuate non-essential personnel. We have the situation under control." "Instructor Cole," Thrix replied curtly. "No," David said, still watching the displays. "You don't understand. It's not hunting randomly. It's herding." Another alarm sounded as the Ravager struck in Section F, driving a group of cadets toward the central hub, then Section J, forcing maintenance crews into the same area. Each attack was precise, strategic, designed not just to kill, but to manipulate the movement of everyone on the station. Dr. Nala's equipment registered massive electromagnetic signatures from the creature's location, but her sensors couldn't explain what was generating them. The Ravager seemed to be interfering with electronics simply by existing near them. "Dr. Nala," David said urgently, "what do you know about this creature's home environment?" "The Outer Rim reports describe pack hunters," she replied, her mandibles chattering with stress. "Highly social, but only 3 specimens were ever captured alive." "Pack hunters," David repeated. Something cold settled in his chest. "Commander, where are the other 2 specimens?" Thrix checked his records, his face paling beneath his scales. They were shipped to Academy Station Delta and Research Facility Prime. Both locations went silent last week." The horrible truth settled over the command center like a shroud. This wasn't just an escape. It was a coordinated assault by creatures intelligent enough to plan across multiple star systems. The lights went out completely. When emergency illumination flickered back on, something moved in the shadows beyond the command center's blast windows. The Ravager pressed itself against the transparent aluminum, studying the people inside with eyes that held far too much intelligence. It tilted its head, almost like a curious dog. Then it smiled, revealing rows of teeth that could shred battle armor. And from somewhere deep in the station's bowels, something answered its call with a sound that made every species present remember what it felt like to be prey. Silence had a weight in the darkened corridors of Starforge Academy. David moved through shadows that seemed to breathe, his footsteps deliberately steady while chaos erupted in distant sections of the station. Behind him, evacuation teams herded civilians toward escape pods with the desperate efficiency of prey animals fleeing a forest fire. Ahead of him, something patient and intelligent waited in the darkness. David's childhood had been spent in places where patience meant survival. The Australian outback didn't forgive mistakes, and the creatures that lived there had taught him lessons no academy could provide. His grandfather, an Aboriginal tracker, had shown him how to read the land's moods, how to understand what silence meant when it settled over hunting grounds. "You walk like prey," his grandfather had said when David was 8 years old, watching him stumble through red sand. "But you think like prey too. That's why you're afraid." Now, 30 years later, David walked through recycled air and metal corridors with the same lessons echoing in his mind. Don't think like prey, don't move like prey, and most importantly, don't fear what hunts you. understand it. The Ravager's trail was invisible to sensors, but David didn't need electronics. Claw marks on metal walls showed where the creature had tested surfaces for climbing. Displaced dust particles indicated which air vents it had investigated. Most telling were the places where it hadn't attacked when it could have. Those revealed intelligence far beyond animal instinct. David rounded a corner and stopped. In the corridor ahead, 3 parallel scratches marked the wall at chest height. Fresh scratches made within the last few minutes. The creature had been here, marking its territory like a wolf leaving scent markers for its pack. But these weren't territorial markers. They were a message. David approached the scratches and placed his hand against the metal. The marks were precise, deliberate, made by something that understood the psychological impact of letting prey know they were being watched. Clever, David said quietly to the empty corridor. His voice carried no fear, only acknowledgement. Somewhere in the darkness beyond, he felt rather than saw movement. The Ravager was listening. David continued forward, past blast doors sealed shut by emergency protocols, past flickering lights that created pools of illumination in an ocean of shadow. His breathing remained steady, controlled. Prey breathing showed panic, short gasps that broadcasted terror to anything with proper senses. Predator breathing was different, deeper, patient. He reached the central hub of the station, where multiple corridors converged in a wide space designed for gatherings. Here the lights had failed completely, leaving only the pale glow of emergency strips along the floor. David stopped in the center of the hub and waited. The attack didn't come. Instead, he heard something that made his skin tighten with recognition, breathing that wasn't his own, steady and controlled, coming from multiple directions. The Ravager was circling him, staying just beyond visual range but close enough that David could feel its presence. Minutes passed. Neither moved. David remembered being 12 years old, tracking through scrubland with his grandfather when they encountered a pack of dingoes. The wild dogs had surrounded them, not attacking but evaluating, testing to see if these humans understood the rules of predator engagement. Stand still, his grandfather had whispered. Don't show fear, don't show aggression. Show respect. The dingoes had circled them for nearly an hour before the pack leader approached. It had looked directly into David's eyes, measuring something beyond size or strength. After an eternity, the animal had given a small nod and led its pack away. Now, in the mechanical wilderness of Starforge Academy, David felt the same evaluation taking place. The Ravager moved closer. David could hear claws clicking softly against metal flooring as the creature tested his reactions. Most prey would have panicked by now, would have run or called for help or tried to find weapons. David did none of those things. He turned slowly toward the sound and spoke in the same tone he would use with a nervous horse. I know you're there. I know you're intelligent enough to understand that I'm not running. Something shifted in the darkness. The breathing pattern changed, became more focused. David continued, You've been studying us since you arrived, learning our weaknesses, our fear responses, our pack dynamics, but you haven't studied me yet. A low sound emerged from the shadows, not quite a growl, but not quite vocalization either. It was the sound of curiosity wrapped in wariness. You killed the others because they couldn't see past their own assumptions, David said calmly. They thought you were just an animal, something to be contained or destroyed. But you're not an animal, are you? The Ravager stepped into the edge of the emergency lighting. David got his first clear look at the creature that had terrorized the station. It was beautiful in the way that perfect predators were beautiful. Every line of its body spoke of evolution refined for hunting. The metallic scales weren't armor. They were sensory organs picking up electromagnetic signatures and heat variations. The color-shifting camouflage wasn't just visual, it was emotional, allowing the creature to read and respond to the psychological states of its prey. But the eyes were what made David's breath catch. They held intelligence, recognition, and something that might have been relief. The creature tilted its head, studying David with the same intensity that David was studying it. Neither moved aggressively. Both recognized something familiar in the other's posture, breathing and gaze. You're a pack leader, David realized. The others you called to, they're not just hunters. They're your family. The Ravager took another step closer. David could see scars along its hide, evidence of battles fought not just for territory but for survival. This wasn't a mindless killer. It was a parent, a protector, fighting to reunite with its own kind in a galaxy that saw it only as a monster. David held perfectly still as the creature approached to within arm's reach. He could feel the heat radiating from its body, could smell the alien scent that was part metal, part musk, part something entirely foreign. The Ravager leaned forward and inhaled deeply, reading David's scent the way a wolf might investigate a new pack member. Then slowly, deliberately, the creature lowered its massive head until it was level with David's chest. The gesture was unmistakable across any species. Submission from a predator that had never submitted to anything. David reached out with steady hands and placed his palm against the creature's metallic hide. The Ravager's breathing slowed, tension leaving its body as it recognized something it had been searching for since its capture. An equal, a fellow predator who understood the rules of respect rather than dominance. In the distance, security teams shouted to each other as they tried to track the escaped creature. But here, in the heart of the station, two apex predators from different worlds acknowledged each other with the oldest language in the universe, the language of mutual understanding. Time moved differently when predators faced each other in perfect stillness. David felt each heartbeat stretch into eternity as the Ravager held its submissive posture, massive head lowered in acknowledgement of something beyond size or strength. Through the station's communication system, panicked voices crackled with updates. Security teams reported no contact with the escaped creature. Dr. Nala's sensors showed impossible readings from the central hub. Commander Thrix demanded explanations that no one could provide, but David heard none of it. His world had narrowed to the rhythm of breathing, the warmth of alien skin beneath his palm, and the profound recognition passing between two beings who understood survival at its most fundamental level. The Ravager raised its head slowly, studying David's face with eyes that reflected intelligence far beyond what the galaxy's military minds could comprehend. This wasn't the vacant stare of an animal responding to training. This was consciousness evaluating consciousness, measuring worth in ways that had nothing to do with technology or firepower. David remembered the moment his understanding of predators had truly crystallized. He was 15, alone in the outback after his grandfather's funeral, when he encountered a pack of wild dogs led by a scarred female with one blind eye. She could have taken him easily, but instead she had tested his resolve with a display that lasted 4 hours. The test hadn't been about fighting. It had been about patience, about proving he wouldn't break under pressure, about demonstrating that he understood pack dynamics well enough to neither challenge her authority nor submit like prey. When the test ended, she had touched her nose to his hand for exactly 3 seconds before leading her pack away. In that brief contact, David had felt the weight of acceptance from something that owed him nothing but chose to acknowledge him anyway. Now, aboard Starforge Academy, he felt that same weight as the Ravager continued its evaluation. The creature circled him again, but the movement had changed. This wasn't stalking. It was the careful inspection of a pack leader determining if a newcomer could be trusted with the safety of the group. David turned slowly, maintaining eye contact but never staring directly, allowing the Ravager to examine him from every angle. His muscles remained relaxed but ready, showing alertness without aggression. "You're looking for something specific," David said quietly. "Some signal that tells you whether I'm safe to be around your family." The Ravager paused mid-step, its head tilted in an unmistakably questioning gesture. David smiled, understanding flooding through him. "They're here, aren't they? The other two from your pack. You didn't just escape. You coordinated a rescue mission." From somewhere in the station's depths came a sound that confirmed his suspicion. A low, harmonic call that carried through metal walls and reached the central hub as clearly as if it had been broadcast over the communication system. The Ravager responded with its own call, a complex series of tones that conveyed information far beyond simple location. David couldn't understand the meaning, but he recognized the emotional content: relief, reassurance, love, family reuniting after forced separation. "They're afraid," David realized. "Not of us, for each other. You've been trying to find them while they've been trying to find you." The Ravager approached him again, this time with obvious purpose. It pressed its massive head against David's chest, breathing deeply. The gesture was unmistakable. The creature was memorizing his scent, marking him as safe, ensuring that its packmates would know to trust this particular human. David felt the weight of responsibility settle over him like a physical presence. 3 intelligent beings, separated from their home, hunted across the galaxy, had chosen to trust him with their lives. "I won't let them hurt you," he said, meaning every word. The Ravager stepped back and looked directly into his eyes. For a moment that lasted forever. Predator acknowledged predator across the vast differences of species and origin. Then the creature did something that would be talked about in xenobiology texts for centuries to come. It knelt, the massive frame folded gracefully until the Ravager rested on the metal floor with its head bowed, exposing the vulnerable curve of its neck. The posture was universal among pack hunters, complete submission to recognized authority. But this wasn't submission born of defeat or fear. This was the voluntary acknowledgement of leadership by a being that had never been conquered, only captured. David knelt as well, bringing himself to the creature's eye level. He placed both hands on either side of the Ravager's head, feeling the warmth and strength beneath scales that could deflect energy weapons. "I accept the responsibility," he said formally, though he doubted the creature understood his words. But it understood his tone, his posture, the steady certainty in his voice. The Ravager's eyes closed briefly, then opened to reveal something David had never seen in an alien creature before. Peace. The harsh lighting of the central hub suddenly seemed warmer. The recycled air carried sense of home that neither being had smelled in years. For this moment, surrounded by metal and machinery and the distant sound of hunting parties, they had found something the galaxy thought impossible. Understanding between apex predators from different worlds. When the Ravager stood, its entire demeanor had changed. The coiled tension of a creature ready to fight for its life had been replaced by the alert calm of a pack member who knew its position and trusted its leader. David rose as well, feeling the profound shift in their relationship. The creature that had terrorized the station's security forces now watched him with the devotion of a partner, waiting for direction. The sound came again from the depths of the station, closer this time. The other 2 members of the pack had heard their leader's calls and were approaching. "They need to know I'm safe to approach," David said, "that I won't hurt them or allow others to hurt them." The Ravager moved to stand beside him, its massive frame a clear statement of protection and alliance. When the others arrived, they would see their pack leader standing calmly next to a human, breathing easily, showing no signs of distress. They would understand that this human was different. As footsteps echoed through distant corridors, security teams still searching for threats that were no longer threats, David felt the peculiar satisfaction that came from solving problems through understanding rather than force. The galaxy saw these creatures as monsters to be destroyed. But David saw what they really were. A family trying to survive in a universe that feared what it didn't understand. The irony wasn't lost on him. Humans were often viewed the same way. Perhaps that's why the recognition had come so easily. Both species were predators trying to find their place among civilizations that preferred their dangers to be more predictable. Dr. Nala's compound eyes had never processed readings like the ones flooding her screens. The electromagnetic signatures from the central hub defied every xenobiological principle she understood, while her behavioral analysis software crashed repeatedly, trying to categorize what the security cameras were showing. Humans standing calmly beside the galaxy's most feared predator. The Ravager had positioned itself, protectively next to David, but its posture showed none of the aggressive tension from earlier. Instead, the creature appeared almost content. "This is impossible," whispered Security Chief Kale, his 3 hearts beating in syncopated panic. The creature should be tearing him apart. Commander Thrick studied the displays with growing unease. His military training said this was either an elaborate trap or evidence that humans possessed capabilities they had hidden from the galactic community. "Doctor," Thrix rumbled, "what is your analysis?" Dr. Nala's mandibles clicked rapidly as she processed the data streams. "Sir, the neurochemical readings from both the human and the Ravager show elevated levels of chemicals associated with pack bonding, but not just similar chemicals, identical ones." "Impossible," Kale repeated. "They evolved on different worlds. That's what makes this so fascinating." Nala's excitement overcame her fear as the scientist in her took control. "Commander, I need to run comparative DNA analysis on the human instructor." Before Thrix could respond, proximity alarms screamed throughout the command center. Two more massive shapes appeared on the station's internal sensors, moving through corridors toward the central hub. The other Ravagers had arrived. Security teams scattered as the creatures passed, but the expected attacks never came. The new arrivals moved with purpose rather than aggression, heading directly toward their pack leader. David felt them approach before he saw them. The Ravager beside him tensed, not with fear but with anticipation. Its breathing changed to a complex pattern that David recognized as communication. The first of the newcomers appeared in the hub's entrance, slightly smaller than David's companion but bearing similar scars. Its scales rippled with colors that seemed to convey emotion, blues and greens that suggested relief mixed with caution. The second was the largest of the three, its presence filling the space with an authority that made David's companion lower its head slightly. This was the pack's true alpha, the one the others looked to for final decisions. David remained perfectly still as the two new arrivals studied him. He could feel their evaluation, the same careful assessment he had undergone with the first creature, but this time he had an advocate. His companion moved to stand between David and the newcomers, not as a shield, but as an introduction. The interaction that followed was complex beyond human understanding, a combination of scent sharing, subtle posture changes, and harmonic vocalizations that conveyed information about trust, safety, and acceptance. David watched, fascinated, as the first creature essentially vouched for him to its packmates. Dr. Nala's voice crackled through the station's communication system, her excitement overriding protocol. "Instructor Cole, can you hear me? These readings are extraordinary. The creatures are displaying advanced social behaviors that suggest intelligence levels comparable to higher-order species." David touched the communication panel on his uniform. "Doctor, they're not creatures. They're people. Different from us, but people nonetheless." The words sent shockwaves through the command center. Classifying the Ravagers as people rather than animals changed everything, legally, ethically, and politically. Commander Thrix activated his own communicator. "Instructor Cole, you are ordered to withdraw immediately. We're preparing to flood that section with pacification gas." "No," David said firmly. "That would be murder." "They killed 47 beings during their capture," Thrix snarled. "Soldiers who were trying to separate a family," David replied. "How many beings has the galactic military killed to protect their own families?" The largest Ravager, the true Alpha, approached David slowly. Unlike its packmate, this one showed no immediate signs of submission. Instead, it studied him with eyes that held the weight of leadership, of decisions made under pressure, of responsibility for others' survival. David recognized the look. He had seen it in the mirrors of command posts across human space. The Alpha extended its head toward David, not in submission but in greeting. Equal to equal, leader to leader, David reached out and placed his hand on the creature's scarred snout. The Alpha's skin was warmer than its packmates, and David could feel the steady thrum of a powerful heart beneath the metallic scales. "Your DNA analysis is complete," Dr. Nala's voice interrupted the moment. "Commander, you need to see these results." On screens throughout the station, comparative genetic data appeared. 2 strands of DNA, 1 human and 1 Ravager, displayed side by side. The similarities were impossible to ignore. "They're not identical species," Dr. Nala explained, her voice tight with wonder, "but they show parallel evolutionary development. Both species evolved as persistence predators. Both developed pack-bonding neurochemistry. Both show genetic markers for high intelligence and emotional complexity." Captain Reed's voice joined the conversation from her evacuation station. "What does that mean exactly, Doctor?" "It means," David said quietly, still maintaining contact with the Alpha Ravager, "that humans and Ravagers are more similar than any other 2 species we've discovered. We're evolutionary cousins who developed the same survival strategies on different worlds." The Alpha pulled back and looked directly into David's eyes. In that gaze, David saw recognition of a deeper truth. These beings weren't monsters that had somehow learned to mimic intelligence. They were apex predators who had developed consciousness, empathy, and family bonds as tools for survival, just like humans had done on Earth millions of years earlier. "Sir," came Security Chief Kale's nervous voice, "Galactic Command is demanding a full report. They want to know why we haven't destroyed the creatures yet." David looked at the three Ravagers now gathered around him, their postures relaxed but alert. They had trusted him with their lives, had chosen to see him as protector rather than threat. "Tell Galactic Command," David said calmly, "that the creatures are now under human protection. Anyone who wants to harm them will have to go through me first." The silence that followed was broken only by the soft harmonic calls of the Ravager family as they communicated in their complex language. They were discussing something, reaching a decision through a democratic process that would have impressed political scientists across the galaxy. Finally, the Alpha approached David again and performed the same submissive posture its packmate had shown earlier. The other two followed suit, creating a scene that would redefine humanity's relationship with the galactic community. Three of the galaxy's most feared predators, kneeling before a human who had shown them nothing but respect. Dr. Nala's scanners registered unprecedented neurochemical activity from all four beings. The readings showed emotional states that could only be described as contentment, security, and something remarkably similar to what humans called happiness. "Instructor Cole," came Commander Thrix's grudging voice, "what are your recommendations for handling this situation?" David looked down at the three magnificent beings who had chosen to trust him, then up at the security cameras that carried his image to command centers across the station. "I recommend we start treating them like the intelligent beings they are," he said, "and I recommend that humanity takes responsibility for their protection." The largest Ravager raised its head and made a sound that could only be described as approval. 3 months after the incident that galactic media dubbed the Starforge Miracle, David Cole walked through corridors that hummed with a different kind of energy. Where once fear had poisoned the recycled air, now curiosity and respect flowed through conversations between species who were finally beginning to understand each other. The transformation hadn't been easy. Galactic Command had initially demanded the Ravagers' immediate execution, viewing them as too dangerous for any containment. But David's report, backed by Dr. Nala's genetic analysis and Commander Thrix's reluctant testimony, had changed everything. The revelation that humans and Ravagers shared evolutionary parallels sent shockwaves through xenobiological communities across the galaxy. For the first time, a species had been discovered that thought like humans, that had developed similar survival strategies and social structures despite evolving on a world thousands of light years from Earth. David reached his classroom, no longer called Primitive Warfare but renamed Predator, Psychology and Interspecies Communication. The waiting list for enrollment now stretched across 3 semesters, and his students included cadets from every species represented at Starforge Academy. But the most dramatic change waited in the converted cargo bay that now served as the Ravager's living space. The 3 creatures had been given full resident status rather than prisoner classification. The Alpha, whom David had named Storm for the gray patterns that shifted across her scales during emotional moments, had become the Academy's unofficial mascot. Her 2 packmates, Whisper and Echo, had adapted to station life with remarkable grace. Today's lesson would be the most important one yet. David entered the cargo bay to find the 3 Ravagers engaged in what Dr. Nala had classified as cooperative problem-solving behavior. They were working together to manipulate a complex puzzle box that required precise coordination between all 3 participants. Storm looked up as David approached, her scales shifting to warm gold tones that Dr. Nala had identified as expressing pleasure and recognition. The massive predator stood and approached David with the easy confidence of a family pet, but David never forgot the intelligence behind those glowing eyes. "Ready for today's demonstration?" David asked, scratching behind Storm's auditory ridges. The Ravager leaned into the contact with obvious enjoyment, a behavior that had scandalized military observers when they first witnessed it. Storm's response was a complex harmonic that David had learned, meant agreement mixed with anticipation. The first group of new cadets arrived precisely on schedule. 20 young beings from across the galaxy, all wide-eyed with terror and excitement at their first close encounter with the legendary Ravagers. David watched their reactions with professional interest. The Soros cadets tried to project dominance through posture, but their scent betrayed their nervousness. The Chiteks clustered together, mandibles clicking in rapid anxiety patterns, The lumens glowed with colors that indicated deep uncertainty. Captain Reed, now promoted to lieutenant and serving as David's assistant instructor, guided the group to a safe observation distance. "Today," David announced, "you're going to learn the most important lesson in interspecies relations. Fear is a choice." Without warning, David walked directly toward the three Ravagers. The cadets gasped as Storm rose to meet him, her 4-meter frame towering above the human instructor. Then Storm lowered her massive head and gently bumped it against David's chest in greeting. "These beings could kill me in seconds," David said conversationally, running his hand along Storm's neck. "They're faster than any species here, stronger than the Soros, more intelligent than most of us give them credit for. So why don't they?" A young Cheetah cadet Buzz raised a trembling claw. "Because you control them somehow?" "No," David said firmly. "I don't control them. I respect them." Whisper and Echo approached, flanking Storm in a formation that looked threatening, until David explained its true purpose. "They're protecting me," he said as the two Ravagers positioned themselves where they could watch all entrances to the bay. Not because they have to, but because they want to. David spent the next hour demonstrating the complex relationship he had built with the three predators. He showed how Storm responded to vocal commands not because she was trained like an animal, but because she understood the cooperative benefits of communication. He illustrated how all three Ravagers had learned to modify their hunting instincts to function within the station's social structure. Most importantly, he proved that fear was not the same as respect. "Lieutenant Reed," David called, "would you like to demonstrate?" Reed approached nervously but with determination. Over the past months, she had worked closely with David to understand Ravager psychology. Storm watched her approach with alert interest, scales shifting to neutral patterns. Reed extended her hand slowly, allowing Storm to investigate her scent. After a moment of evaluation, the massive predator gently touched her nose to Reed's palm. The cadets watched in amazement as their fellow student interacted safely with the creature that had once terrorized the station. "The key," David explained, "is understanding that intelligence creates choice." Storm chose to accept Lieutenant Reed because Reed approached with respect rather than fear or aggression. A Soros cadet named Crick spoke up, his voice skeptical. "But surely these creatures are still dangerous. They killed dozens during their capture." Storm's scales darkened at the mention of those events, and she made a low sound that conveyed deep sadness. "They were defending their family," David replied. "Separated from each other, imprisoned without trial, treated as animals rather than people. How would any of us react under similar circumstances?" Dr. Nala entered the bay carrying her latest research data. Over the months, she had documented remarkable developments in Ravager behavior and cognition. "Today's neurochemical readings show continued adaptation," she announced to the class. "All three subjects demonstrate emotional states consistent with contentment and social bonding. They form not just pack bonds with each other, but extended pack bonds with station personnel they interact with regularly." She pulled up holographic displays showing brain activity patterns. "Most significantly, they show the same neurological markers for empathy that we see in highly social species. They understand that their actions affect others, and they modify their behavior accordingly." One of the Lumen cadets, Glow, asked the question David had been waiting for. "If they're truly intelligent beings, why aren't they given full citizenship rights?" "They are," David said simply. "As of last week, Galactic Council voted to grant the Ravager species full sentient status. Storm, Whisper, and Echo are the first of their kind to hold official citizenship in the galactic community." The implications hit the cadets immediately. These weren't trained animals or contained threats. They were citizens, neighbors, equals under galactic law. Storm seemed to understand the conversation's significance. She moved to the center of the group, lowered herself to a resting position, and looked directly at each cadet in turn. The gesture was clearly intentional, a formal introduction from one citizen to others. One by one, the cadets approached, some hesitantly, others with growing confidence, all with newfound respect. David watched with satisfaction as fear transformed into curiosity, then acceptance, and finally genuine friendship. Later that evening, as the station settled into its night cycle, David found himself in the observation lounge overlooking the stars. Storm had followed him as she often did during quiet hours. The massive predator settled beside David's chair, her presence a comforting weight in the peaceful darkness. "You know," David said quietly, "they used to call your species monsters." Storm made a questioning sound. "Now they're starting to understand that the real monsters are the ones who refuse to look past their fear." Through the viewport, stars wheeled in their eternal dance while two apex predators from different worlds shared a moment of perfect understanding. In the distance, the sounds of the station carried on, conversations between species learning to see each other as individuals rather than stereotypes, laughter echoing through corridors once filled with suspicion, and the soft harmonic calls of whisper and echo as they settled in for sleep. The galaxy was slowly learning what David had always known. Monsters existed only in the minds of those who chose not to look deeper. True strength came not from dominating the dangerous but from earning their respect.